Australia is currently facing severe economic challenges, including falling real wages, rising costs of living, disappearing welfare, unemployment, and more. The root cause of all of these lies in Australia's exaggerated housing prices. The Australian property market is in a complete Ponzi scheme. These aren't my words, they come from Matt Barrie, founder of freelancer.com and part-time professor at the University of Sydney.
The root of all evil in this country is the astronomical price of housing.
Last week, Matt appeared on a podcast. At first glance, I thought, here comes another guy predicting the housing market crash. But as I watched, I got drawn in and couldn't stop. By the end of the 51-minute episode, I was impressed. Matt's deep understanding of the economy and his sharp observations were quite similar to what I've been saying. His perspective is unique, and I agree with many of his points. What surprised me even more was that some of my views were actually changed by Matt. The Australian housing market truly is a game of passing the baton. Yet this has also strengthened my belief in investing in the Australian real estate market. In this episode, I will explore how Australia's economy reached this point. Why are housing prices the root of Australia's economic and social problems? How did most companies, banks, media, politicians, and the 60 to 70% of Australians who own homes, along with the 30% who don't, either willingly or unwillingly become part of this 20-year-plus housing speculation game? Will Australian house prices continue to rise? When will the bubble burst? And what should we do to respond? Hi, I'm Alex. Welcome to Aus Property Strategy, where I share information about real estate investment, economic trends, and wealth creation. If you like this video, smash the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to watch new weekly videos. Without further ado, let's get into it.
It's not a functional society anymore. You need people to be able to afford to buy housing and shelter in order to have a functional society. And in Sydney now, I think the last time I looked at the median house price is about 1.8 million, which is mathematically impossible for the average person to buy the average house.
Matt is absolutely right. Sociologists in Australia say if the ratio of median house price to median household income is below 3, housing is considered affordable. In the 1980s, house prices in Australia were about 3 times people's income. A ratio of 3 to 4 is considered unaffordable. 4 to 5 is extremely unaffordable, and anything above 5 is outrageous. Currently, Sydney's house prices are 13.3 times the income. The average Sydney resident would need to save for 45 years just to afford the deposit on an average priced house. If you're 20 years old today, you would need to save for 45 years until the retirement age of 65 to buy a house. Sydney's housing market is the second most expensive in the world, only behind Hong Kong. Australia's high housing prices affect every aspect of the economy. To buy a house, people need to earn more, so companies must bear higher costs. Australia's minimum wage is about $24 per hour, the highest in the world. But why is it that you can barely buy anything with $100 at the supermarket? Why are people struggling to afford food and rent? As wages rise, the cost for companies to pay their employees increases, leading to higher prices for goods and services. Everything, healthcare, medicines, clothes, dining out, insurance gets more expensive. In such a situation, the government needs to step in with financial support, offering subsidies, benefits, or just more money. Or it may raise taxes or take on more debt. This is one of the fundamental reasons why federal, state, and local governments in Australia, like those in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland, are facing rising debts, higher taxes, and consistent budget deficits.
We have been on a huge building spree for, 20-something years. Since the Sydney Olympics, we've been building apartments everywhere. In fact, it's really the same narrative which has gone on for a very long period of time, because the question basically and fundamentally is, apartments for who? Everything in the media right now has something to do with property. There's a few reasons for that. One is we obviously have this cost of living crisis, but also the media in this country are completely captured by property because Domain is owned by Fairfax, and I think last time I looked it was about 34% of the market cap. Then News Limited, REA, last time I looked, again was a long time ago, was about 70-something% of the market cap.
If you pay attention to Australian media, you'll notice a trend. Everything is linked to real estate. When Brisbane won the Olympic bid, the media published articles and interviews about how the win would impact Brisbane's housing market. After the recent Paris Olympics, when Australia won gold medals, the discussion immediately shifted to the impact on Australia's housing prices. China introduces an economic stimulus, and the topic becomes the effect on Australian housing prices. It seems like everything is somehow related to the price of homes in Australia. To this date, there isn't an official statistic on exactly how many homes have been built in Australia since 2000. However, using the 2023 figure of 160,000 new homes built per year, Australia would have added 3 to 4 million homes in the last 24 years. Now the key question is, how much demand do locals have for those new homes?
What would you think the latent demand for additional housing is in Australia from Australians? The additional demand for housing from Australians that's required is zero.
The answer, according to Matt, is zero. His argument is that, on average, each woman needs to have 2.1 children to maintain population levels. But Australian women have a fertility rate of 1.5 to 1.6, and it hasn't exceeded 2.1 since 1975. Meanwhile, wage growth lags far behind the pace of rising house prices. Real purchasing power is experiencing its largest decline in history. For 20 to 24 years olds, wage purchasing power has dropped to 2008 levels, but the prices of goods haven't gone down. As purchasing power declines, so does the desire to have children. So the demand for additional housing from Australian locals is zero. This is where I disagree. Australian households are getting smaller every year. For example, if 10 people once lived in one home, but now each person lives separately, that creates the demand for 9 additional homes. This means that domestic demand for housing is actually growing. In reality, the average household size in Australia has decreased from 2.9 people per household in the 1980s to 2.5 in 2023, which alone creates demand for at least 1 million extra homes. While I don't fully agree with Matt, I understand his point. So who are the main demand drivers for these additional homes? That's right, overseas immigrants. Most of the demand for new housing in Australia comes from overseas immigrants. Every year, 800,000 to 900,000 new immigrants arrive in Australia, while 200,000 to 300,000 people leave, resulting in a net migration of 500,000 to 600,000. Of Australia's current population of 27 million, 2.5 million hold temporary visas. According to UNESCO data, there are 6.4 million international students worldwide, and Australia hosts 800,000 of them, which means Australia alone accounts for 12.5% of the global international student population. In New South Wales, only 33% of people have both parents born in Australia. Nationwide, 30% of the population was born overseas. New South Wales has 8 million residents, and last year, 730,000 people moved to the state, while 450,000 left, largely due to the high cost of living, moving to Queensland or overseas. As immigration increases, housing prices continue to rise. The government keeps building homes to accommodate the growing population. When you look at what's happening in the Australian housing market, it really seems like a game of passing the baton, namely a Ponzi scheme.
Something that I'll describe in a very nice way as a Ponzi scheme, but it's actually worse than a Ponzi scheme. There's no economic utility really in residential houses at this point in time because the yield generated from rent is way below anything to be able to generate a return.
So why do we have such a large immigration policy and massive housing development? Because over the last 20 to 30 years, Australian politicians didn't know how to run the economy and chose the easiest path. Australia's key economic pillars are selling academic degrees, mining resources, energy, and residency. These bring in income from outside, but Australia's own economy doesn't efficiently create value. We sell iron ore and coal to China, which uses them to make steel and build homes, boosting their GDP. We sell natural gas to Japan, and they resell it. Yet the east coast of Australia still imports natural gas. Australia hardly uses coal itself due to its pollution, but selling coal to China, which causes pollution, won't affect the climate differently, right? As for selling degrees, it's a profitable business. But if we stop welcoming international students to come to Australia, how many people will still want an Australian degree? Australia signed a free trade agreement with India, under which it's supposed to bring in 19,000 yoga instructors annually. Yet the Australian Yoga Association has only 4,000 to 5,000 members. The entire immigration system isn't designed to attract the talent or boost productivity to create real wealth. It's simply a way to increase Australia's overall GDP and make politicians look good. The result is a decline in internal productivity, with the country becoming increasingly dependent on external sources of growth. For the past 20 years, the Australian government's approach has been to boost overall GDP, raise house prices, and suppress real wages. As long as these objectives are met, Australian companies and investors are happy. All of these rely heavily on mass immigration. New immigrants need housing and compete with locals for jobs. It pushes up house prices while driving wages down. If you take a closer look at ASX 100 listed companies, most, apart from mining firms, benefit from rising house prices. Australian banks essentially offer one product, home loans. So increasing house prices benefits the entire financial sector. Construction companies benefit too. Higher house prices mean they can build more houses and make more money. 18 industries in the real estate supply chain profit from this. The media is happy because more people care about housing, which drives more traffic to their platforms. Even 60 to 70% of Australians who own homes are happy because their property values go up. And what about the politicians? With the support of big corporations and the 60 to 70% of homeowners, their power is secure. Meanwhile, companies enjoy high profits from suppressed wages, making investors even happier. Australia is currently facing a cost of living crisis, with housing becoming unaffordable. Mass immigration has lowered real wages, and everyone from banks to businesses to the government is benefiting from a system based on immigration plus rising house prices plus wage suppression. The Australian housing market has become a national Ponzi scheme. But the question remains, when will this bubble burst, and what will trigger it? There are three possible reasons why the bubble may burst. Number one, Australians abandon their just enjoy your life mindset, reject laziness, and are willing to roll up their sleeves and work very hard to effectively create value, increasing the overall wealth in the country. Only then will the government have the drive to change the current economic structure and immigration policies. Without alternative sources of wealth, the government is unlikely to take strict measures against itself. Giving up on selling resources, degrees, and residency to attract immigrants would immediately cause a sharp economic downturn, and the government wouldn't last long. Rather than committing political suicide, they'd prefer to stick with the status quo. But I don't think Australians will suddenly change their mindset and start working hard. Look at today's uni movement. Productivity is falling, yet people are demanding higher real wages and the right to disconnect after hours. All of this reduces efficiency and limits creativity. Australians won't change until they've experienced poverty. The country really needs a deep economic crisis to reset itself. But before any change happens, they'll keep using this easy, no-effort path to wealth, living day by day. Real change will take at least a generation. Number two, people from other countries no longer want to immigrate to Australia. If Australia loses its appeal to immigrants, it would force the economy to adjust from within. At that point, Australians would no longer have anyone else to blame. No more complaints about immigrants taking jobs or driving up house prices. They'd have to look at themselves. This would be the turning point for Australia's reboot. So under what conditions would people stop wanting to immigrate to Australia? Those from less affluent countries would still want to come. Despite Australia's flaws, it's still better than their home environments. This group of people won't stop wanting to immigrate unless Australia imposes a ban. Most countries allow free movement of people and capital, with only a few restricting emigration. If these countries chose to isolate themselves, their middle class and wealthy may not be able to leave, but this won't affect people from other countries. What would make the middle class and wealthy voluntarily give up on immigrating to Australia? That would happen when the benefits Australia offers, such as welfare, property protection, and income opportunities, diminish, or when anti-wealth sentiment grows significantly in the society. But fundamental social changes like this can't happen overnight and may never happen. Number three, another scenario is if Australian politicians take a bold move and shut down immigration. Initially, those struggling with housing affordability would be thrilled, feeling like social justice had finally arrived. But soon, all industries related to construction, including the banking and finance sectors, would fall into recession. There'd be waves of companies' bankruptcies and layoffs. Given Australia's weak capacity for wealth creation and innovation, this would inevitably lead to a deep economic crisis. At that point, the government would face two tough choices. Number one, restart the immigration program to pull Australia out of the recession. Or number two, hold firm and get beaten in the next election. Which option do you think the government would choose? I agree with the view that the Australian housing market is a game of passing the baton, much like in many other countries. As long as Australians keep the enjoy your life attitude and remain lazy, and as long as people still want to come to Australia, the country will continue to rely on immigration. As long as the immigration system remains unchanged, house prices in Australia will keep rising. This game could eventually collapse, but I don't believe a fundamental market correction will happen before I retire. So during this time, you have two choices. Number one, don't play the property game. Hold on to the dream that the Australian housing market will eventually crash. Work diligently, compete with new immigrants for jobs, and watch your real wage decline. Vent your frustration by leaving angry comments on media and social media platforms. Keep working to support your family well into retirement, standing in opposition to the media, most companies, all the banks, most politicians, and the 60 to 70% of Australians who own homes. Or number two, you can join us at Aus Property Strategy, play the game, and accumulate wealth quickly through property investment, leaving those who don't buy homes far behind. turning their envy and jealousy into a sign of our investment success, achieving financial freedom. If you made it this far, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Turn on the notification bell to watch new weekly videos. Have a good one. Bye.